Good evening, hurricane nerds. If someone in the chat could just give me a yes or no if they can hear audio right now, um, just for a little mic check here. Looks like it's working on my end, but I'm not the one watching the stream. So, again, if someone can just give me a little thumbs up or something like that. Okay, excellent. We'll get started here at the top of the hour. Can you hear me now? I wasn't saying anything there for a minute, so hopefully the audio levels are okay. People can hear. I did have a couple of confirmations. All right, great. Checking our time. We'll start here in about 45 seconds here. Give everyone till the top of the hour. Sorry, this one's starting a little bit late tonight. It's a pretty busy week for me here, so I'm trying to squeeze a few of these in the evening as I can. I will mention this out there. Some of the Weather Service offices, I know Lake Charles, on all their social media platforms, has been doing live streams, usually 30 minutes after the official Hurricane Center update. So tune into those during the day too for some other updates. And just so you know, the Hurricane Center does do their updates on a fixed schedule. They only update the forecast at 4 a.m., 10 a.m., 4 p.m., and 10 p.m. Central Time. So they're on that fixed schedule, so no need to sit there and refresh and worrying about if you're going to miss the next update or something. They're on that fixed schedule, 4 and 10 a.m. and p.m. So the next one is still 2 hours away. Now, they are doing these little intermediate updates every 3 hours that they'll do. What's that going to be? 7 and 1 o'clock a.m. and p.m. But that they're only giving position updates and intensity updates. They only do a new track every 6 hours. Again, 4 a.m. In p.m., 10 a.m. and p.m. Central Time. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I know I always give my standard disclaimer since we always have new folks here. This is just me talking. I'm not representing my employer, any other organization, anything like that. Please, please, please follow the advice of your local officials. They know the situation on the ground better than I do about what areas flood, what areas are, are particularly susceptible. So always listen to your local officials. What I'm doing here is I'm showing you, what the official forecast is. I don't have any secret information or anything like that, but just kind of shedding some light on what's going on behind the forecast, what the storm's up to here. So what we're looking at right now, this is the radar out of Brownsville, Texas, and we're already getting some of the outer rain bands there. In fact, one moving through the Brownsville, South Padre Island area as we speak. But if you look in the lower right-hand corner of the radar screen, you can actually see the center of circulation, maybe even a little bit of an eye there. Now, one thing, and we'll look at the satellite picture here in a moment, not a lot of really intense storm activity in the center. There was maybe a little bit of an eye wall earlier that kind of weakened. Maybe something trying to develop. Now, I'll caveat that we're over 100 nautical miles away from the radar, so we're looking pretty high on the up in the storm right here. But still, generally, for if we were looking at a stronger, certainly something as a hurricane, we're still a tropical storm right now, we would see a much more defined eye wall there. So switching over to our infrared satellite picture, here's what it looks like. Tonight, maybe a little hard to see on the screen, so hopefully, yeah, I can see my cursor on there. Here's Brownsville, Texas, coming up around the Texas coast to Lake Charles, over to New Orleans, like that. So looking at the center of Francine right here, seeing a little bit of thunderstorm activity trying to develop around the eye. What this is, this infrared satellite picture, the sun has gone down, so This is a sensor that is looking at the temperatures of the cloud tops here. So the colder the cloud tops, the higher the clouds, the more ice content. That's the very intense thunderstorm activity. And we do see some intense activity up here to the northeast of the center. But again, if we're going to see something that was becoming very quickly organized, we'd see a lot more of this intense thunderstorms, or convection, if you want to use the meteorological term here, and more intense convection near the center. Now you're seeing these kind of pixelated colors on here. What this is actually lightning activity. Technically, it's lightning density, looking at basically the number of strikes within that pixel right here. So we can see some a pretty good amount of lightning activity up there in the central Gulf, but again, very displaced from the center. I think it's fighting a little bit of wind shear, but it certainly looks a lot better than it did when we talked yesterday. Certainly enough to justify that 55 knot intensity or 65 mile per hour intensity as set by the Hurricane Center. So what does the official forecast look like? So this is the from their intermediate update at 7 p.m. Again, the forecast, they last updated it was at 4 p.m. Central Time. Right here, going to see that expecting this northeastward turn to begin here in the next 12 hours or so, keeping it off the Texas coast. There are tropical storm watches for pretty much the entirety of the Texas coast, and then intensifying to a hurricane, because as we'll talk more about, we'll get into the details of the intensity forecast in a moment. Are still expecting it to become a hurricane and then approach the south central Louisiana coast as a Category 2 hurricane. They actually have sped it up slightly. This is showing it just off the Louisiana coast at 1 p.m. Wednesday. So that has actually moved up our time frame just a little bit on those expected impacts. And that is also why the Weather Service has gone ahead with the hurricane warnings indicated in red and the blue showing where those tropical storm warnings are. The pink and kind of this hatched area, they have both hurricane watches and tropical storm warnings there, because lower confidence on how far inland the hurricane winds will make, definitely along the coast. Maybe more like gust to hurricane force as you get further inland, and then the tropical storm watches further to the northeast. One thing I noted this yesterday, this is still the case. Notice it's in, it's out. You know, by 1 p.m. Thursday, it's practically near, a little south of Memphis, Tennessee, right there. So we're not talking something like a Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Florence a few years ago, where it's just going to sit in one area and drop, feet of rain. We're not talking a 40-inch rainmaker here. It's going to be in and it's going to be out. Still going to produce some hefty rainfall totals, but nothing, extraordinary is forecast from this. Wind and surge are going to be probably your primary threats with that. So let's take a look at some of the forecast guidance. Going off of our usual ensemble guidance, what we do again with this for those for the uninitiated here, we have four major models here. We have the European Center model, the GFS, which is the American model run in Washington D.C., the UK Meteorological Center, and the Canadian Meteorological Center model. And what we do is there's some uncertainty, and you have to get the initial state of the model right, or if your starting point is wrong, the whole forecast is gonna be wrong, right? Well, guess what? We can't ever perfectly get the initial state of the model. The model also makes some assumptions, so the further out in time you go, the more error you get. So what we do is we take that model, we'll tweak the initial state of the model, and then run it again. We do this many times, over 100 times across all four of these models. And so it lets us see how much confidence the model has, because if all of these tracks I'm about to show are very tightly clustered, it's basically saying even accounting for some what we'd call initialization error, the track forecast is still not changing very much. So it gives us an idea of how much confidence is in the forecast. So here's our starting point, and we'll go to, this is tomorrow morning. So this would be about 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, right here showing the center there off of the Rio Grande. And then we get to, this is 7 a.m. Wednesday. Now, one thing I am noticing here is, while it looks like the track forecast is pretty good, I should say fairly confident. These are fairly clustered. Notice there are some timing differences here. The GFS and UK models are notably faster than the European Center model on that. And then this would be 7 p.m. Wednesday, the 12th here, with the European Center and what we call the ensemble mean, which is just a center point of all these little simulations, still offshore, but the GFS and UK models already on shore by that time. So if I back it up to 1 p.m., it does look like the Hurricane Center is biting on this faster solution here because their forecast is pretty close to this GFS point here at 1 p.m. And then it moves inland. And then there we are Thursday morning moving up the Mississippi Valley. So still a little uncertainty on the exact timing. We'll talk about kind of what that means here in just a moment. So, but first I want to talk about the intensity forecast. How strong of a storm are we looking at? Intensity is notoriously difficult to forecast. It's hard for us to model kind of like, the interior of the hurricane and all. So what the high end of these models is showing is up to a Category 2 hurricane, which is more or less what the Hurricane Center is showing. That the heavy black line, that was their official forecast. So they're actually showing this pretty much right at that threshold of Category 1 and 2, but some models are stronger. And one thing, and they did mention this in their forecast discussion earlier, so they referred to something, this is called the SHIPS forecast. It stands for Statistical Hurricane Intensity Prediction Scheme. And what it does, it just looks at a lot of the variables that affect, it's a regression model, just looks at different things such as wind shear, sea surface temperatures, mid-level humidity, oceanic heat content, just does a bunch of statistical stuff to try to determine what the strength of the hurricane is. But what I'm looking at here is this rapid intensification probability. It's showing a 66% chance of a 25 knot increase in the next 24 hours here, which would bring it to 80 knots, which is about 90 miles per hour. So it's Category 1 hurricane. With their and then this bottom column, the person who created this on his website, he'll show you relative to climatology how just to give you an idea. So it's just saying 6 times climatology, so that would be a pretty fast intensification. But notice this 35 knots in 24-hour, 35% chance. So about a 1 in 3 chance it intensifies by 35 knots. It would bring it to 90 knots or about 100 miles an hour, well into the Category 2 range there. We could see it intensify a little bit quicker than kind of what the headline intensity is showing. Again, forecast is showing right around that threshold, Cat 1, Category 2 at landfall. A 2 to 3 is not out of the question. It would, if we got a 40 knot increase, which is a 1 in 5 chance, 19% chance of that occurring, on there, you'd be knocking on the door of a Category 3. So my advice, and this is just usually, I know talking to emergency managers I've spoken to on the Gulf Coast and all, they like to operate under this philosophy of prepare for 1 category above the advertised or the forecast intensity. So I would prepare for a Category 2, Category 3 storm on there. May not end up being that strong, but that's probably a good place to go. Now, one thing on this intensity forecast, you'll see this wind shear. Wind shear is something that hurricanes do not like. That will weaken a storm, certainly halt the intensity. And the Hurricane Center does mention this in their discussion. For the next 24 hours, wind shear is low. Sea surface temperatures are very warm, over 30 Celsius. That's very warm. Ocean temperatures there. Lots of humidity to work with. So during the next 24 hours, and that's probably why you're seeing these higher end probabilities of rapid intensification, it's going to be a very favorable environment. Not seeing it just yet on satellite, but these things can take off very quickly. I mean, I've certainly seen cases where we go to bed, it still looks pretty ragged on satellite, and we wake up in the morning and, we've got a nice, hurricane out there on satellite. But notice what happens after 24 hours. We get to this 24 to 48 hour period of the lead up to landfall. Wind shear rapidly increases. The sea surface temperatures don't drop much. I mean, that's 30 to 29 Celsius. It's a pretty trivial difference. Humidity starts coming down a little bit. But the big one is that increase in wind shear. That is getting up 25, 50 knots of shear is pretty hostile to a hurricane. So what the Hurricane Center said in their discussion, and we can see this in the data here, is that we're likely to see some pretty quick intensification in the next 24 hours, and then that intensification is likely to halt after about 24 hours as it encounters that wind shear. So the big question is going to be how much intensification can we get in that next 24 hours before it starts running into the more hostile environment closer to the Gulf Coast, halting the intensity, possibly even weakening it slightly before landfall. So zooming into some of our model projections here, this is just a closer look rather than the spaghetti ones. So right here, this is Wednesday morning. This is Wednesday at 7 a.m., showing the storm in the northwest Gulf of Mexico. I notice this is the newer run than the last one I just showed here. So here's 1 p.m. and then here's 4 p.m. on Wednesday, and then 7 p.m. Wednesday. This model showing landfall is basically a Category 1 hurricane very near Morgan City, Louisiana. Right there. So again, a little bit to work out on the exact timing, but I think, and I'll show this in a moment. I'm sorry I lost our track there. I'll show what that will mean for the onset of winds. I think just given the speed of the storm as it is, it'll be a fairly, I don't want to say insignificant difference, but it's not going to be either way, it's going to be Wednesday. And so then as we go, there's Thursday morning, well to the north. So conditions really improving along the coast once we get to Thursday. Like I said, it's not going to hang around and drop, 40 inches of rain or something like that. And then here's the European center model. I mentioned yesterday it wasn't latching onto it. Well, now it definitely is. And there's the Category 1 hurricane. This is, again, how I mentioned, it's a little bit slower. This is showing, this is 7 p.m. Wednesday right here. Still offshore. And then not till 1 a.m. This is 1 a.m. Thursday morning, in the wee hours of Thursday morning. The center coming ashore near Intracoastal City of Louisiana. Looks like I would call that about a Category 1 hurricane, a lot closer to Lafayette there. So it really seems, yesterday we're painting a pretty broad, area. I was saying Houston and New Orleans. I think we can start narrowing that down. I think we're looking at landfall, I'm going to say between Lake Charles, Morgan City area. So I think this is going to be a Lafayette and Baton Rouge event. New Orleans will probably still get, it'll be on the right side of the storm, so still a good bit of rain and wind for the New Orleans area. But I think the most severe impacts with this, we're looking Lafayette and Baton Rouge primarily. I think Lake Charles and Houston, Lake Charles is close enough. They'll certainly still get some wind, a little bit of rain. I think Houston is looking better for any severe impacts. Certainly going to be gusty along the coast, Galveston, maybe a little rainy there. But again, worst impacts looking more like south central Louisiana towards Lafayette and Baton Rouge at this point. So going on to, this is the most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds. And not a lot of change from yesterday, even with them speeding up the track a little bit. They're still going with the most likely time Wednesday morning, seeing those tropical storm force winds beginning along the Louisiana Gulf Coast, and then spreading inland through the day Wednesday. For the Houston, Galveston area, maybe late Tuesday. Tuesday morning, any impacts are still going to be way down on the lower Texas coast by that time. So Tuesday, certainly for folks in Louisiana, Houston on eastward, you've got all day tomorrow. Watch out for some of those outer rain bands that could be out there, but by and large, not worried about a lot of major impacts on Tuesday. So you'll have all day tomorrow, boarding up the windows, if you're planning to travel for wherever you're going to be. But wherever you're going to be, you want to be there Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, conditions are going to start going downhill, and they can go downhill quite quickly with this. And then we should, so with that, and then as far as the worst impacts for the Lafayette, Baton Rouge area, probably looking Wednesday evening, there into Wednesday overnight, Wednesday night, and then things improving on the backside of it on Thursday. So Wednesday night is going to be where we're seeing the worst conditions there. Talk about rainfall for a minute. Again, I don't think this is going to be the headliner, but still, 4 to 6 inches of rain over a part of Louisiana. Even some areas showing slightly higher, 6 to 8 inches of rain. Nothing to sneeze at. That's enough to, and I know there's been a lot of recent rainfall down there. That'll be enough for certainly all of your usual flood-prone areas. Filling up, some flash flooding is definitely going to be a possibility with that. But again, we're not talking, a 30, 40 inch, whopper of a rainmaker with this. But even then, like I said, 4 to 8 inches of rain. Some areas will probably see 10 plus. I think the 10 plus will be fairly, limited in coverage. You can always get some training of heavier rain bands, always something to watch for, but not a huge rain threat. Just kind of par for the course, I would say, with the tropical system, because it'll be moving out of there fairly quickly. And then storm surge, I want to mention, of course, a coastal impact here. Headline, peak storm surge forecast going 5 to 10 feet above ground level of inundation from Cameron, including Vermilion Bay, over to Port Fourchon, Louisiana. So, certainly any areas outside the levee protection system are going to be in trouble from that, because for anyone that's been to the Louisiana Gulf Coast, it is very low-lying, very flat, with a lot of coastal erosion down there. So that's why if you hear anything about an evacuation in your area, please heed it, because 5 to 10 feet doesn't sound like much, but there's a lot of areas that are below 5 to 10 feet, especially outside of the levee protection systems along the Louisiana Gulf Coast there. Highest will be just to the right of where the center makes landfall. That is one concern, is that just given the shape of Vermilion Bay there, with a landfall just on the west side of the bay, could really funnel quite a bit of storm surge, even for not a very strong hurricane. A Category 1 or 2 can push quite a bit of surge up through Vermilion Bay. So some locally higher amounts, 12 plus feet, are not out of the question in some areas down there, particularly Vermilion, St. Mary, Terrebonne parishes. I will close with this. I haven't seen any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. The last thing I'd planned to just kind of highlighting some of the inland impacts. Lafayette, I think, is the in terms of population centers along the coast, I think we'll probably be seeing the most impacts. Right now, forecasting peak winds, sustained 45, gusts to 75 miles per hour. So that's why they're still holding with the tropical storm warning and hurricane watch for Lafayette Parish. It's looking more like high-end tropical storm conditions right now, but a small deviation in the track, and they mentioned this here, potential for wind of 58 to 73 miles per hour sustained on there. So we could see those wind speeds go up quite a bit depending on the eventual track of it. But right now, planning for gusts around 75, that would be, comparable to something like a Hurricane Lily 2002. Not talking, catastrophic, but certainly enough to cause quite a bit of damage, tree damage, power outages, that kind of thing on there. But again, remember all the caveats I mentioned with the intensity forecast for that. I'll just show that again. If we get more intensification, especially if some of these higher end scenarios of these, 30, 35 knot or even, 40 knot intensification, we could see that wind threat for Lafayette escalate pretty fast on there. Certainly for like the Morgan City area, immediately to the right of where landfall ends up occurring is going to get the strongest winds. Over towards the Baton Rouge area, looking at tropical storm force conditions, possibly gusts into the hurricane force, depending on that intensity. So that is all I had. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I'll just flip back over to the satellite image. I'll probably close out here in just a minute. We'll try to do another one of these tomorrow evening, probably same time around 8 o'clock or so. That'll let us get that 7 o'clock intermediate update in and can digest that, see what the latest is there. So as I said, please listen to your local officials down there. Watch for those updates at 4 o'clock and 10 o'clock a.m. and p.m. Central Time. That's when they put out the new updates, and they're pretty much on time. Like they pretty much drop them right at the top of the hour, like that on a schedule, and that's when you'll get the latest on that. So that's all I have. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and good luck for any preparations. And